Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Town Hall from Home. My name is Brian Egolf, and I am the Speaker of the House in the great state of New Mexico. And I want to welcome all of you for what I think is our 12th episode. We are going into special session next week, so we will not be live next week, but we will resume after the special session, assuming we all come out on the other end, and that the special session, in fact, ends by next Wednesday, which we all expect that it will. I'm very lucky to have with us some of my great colleagues in the legislature to talk a little bit about what the special session is going to look like when it starts next week, and some of the issues that we are working on to have added to the agenda. We don't yet know from the governor what we will be considering at the special session other than fixes to the budget. There, of course, is a tremendous downturn in revenue, so we will have to amend the budget for next year. But beyond that, we're waiting on a final decision. In the meantime, members of the legislature are working on a variety of interesting policy ideas in the hopes that we'll be able to consider them when the legislature convenes next Thursday morning in Santa Fe. So we have with us Senator Daniel Ivey-Soto from Albuquerque, newly appointed and hopefully soon to be re-elected Representative Marian of Albuquerque. She succeeded the late Representative Pratt, and so she's served one session with us and is doing a great job as a former Deputy Attorney General, I think. Is that right?
That's right.
Yep. Of New Mexico. We also have Representative Daymon from Corrales and the west side of Albuquerque, Bernalillo and Sandoval counties. So I'll start by kicking it off and handing it over to Representative Eli. But before I do, I think it's also important to take a moment to reflect on what's happening in the country. Since we last met, our country has been gripped by protests over the murder of George Floyd and trying to grapple with what do we do to set right in our society all the things that are wrong with the way our society treats African Americans and people of color. And we are confident that the New Mexico legislature, working with the governor, will soon start to show the rest of the country how to lead and how to start to heal some of the really difficult and deep cuts that have been part of American life for so long. The murder of Mr. Floyd laid bare the scope and size of the crisis that is facing our country. And we hope, I know those of the members of the legislature that are on this town hall with me, join with me in committing to achieving true social justice in New Mexico. We hope that we'll be able to address that in the upcoming session. As I said, the agenda will be decided by the governor, but we are ready to seize the opportunity if it's presented to us to start to make positive change here in New Mexico and to start to reimagine policing and reinvent the way public safety is delivered in New Mexico in a way that respects the rights and the lives of everyone in New Mexico. So as we head into this conversation, please know that you'll be hearing about those issues, and we'll give a little preview of what we hope to be able to achieve in the special session when it comes to public safety, policing, and holding police accountable, and making it clear that the New Mexico legislature understands and believes that Black Lives Matter, and that the events in this country will guide us moving forward. Representative Eli and Representative Matthews have been working on a proposal to help small business in New Mexico and a few other proposals to help us in our economic recovery from the pandemic. So I'll kick it over to Representative Eli to tell us a little bit about what he's been working on, and then we'll chat with Representative Matthews and then Senator Ivey-Soto, and then we've already got lots of questions submitted on Facebook, so we'll go to those questions. But Representative Eli, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Speaker. So let's start with Representative Matthews, as you're about to see, as the heavier lift in what we're about to talk about. But one of the things that I'm hoping the governor will put on her agenda that we will be able to discuss, and she's indicated that she will, is a business stimulus package, a business loan package. So the question arises, where does the money come from? Since I haven't been a part of these town halls in the past, but I assume you talked some about the budget. We don't have deficit spending in New Mexico. So the question was, if we're going to do some kind of version of what the federal government has done to try and help New Mexico small businesses that maybe haven't been covered by the payroll protection plan and other businesses, where's the money coming from? So it turns out that we have money that's not within the budget. We have two large permanent funds. We're one of only 7 states that have that. We have the land grant permanent fund that was set up before the state was even a state, set up by Congress. And we also have the severance tax permanent fund that was actually set up by the legislature back in the early 70s. So we were looking at the severance fund because that's the money that goes to mostly capital projects. And we were looking to see if maybe we could get money out of something like, well, there's $5 billion in the severance tax permanent fund. About $1.5 billion is available.
Representative Eli,
not otherwise tied up in stocks and bonds.
Representative Eli, you cut up for 1 second. So let me just point out that you're talking about taking money from the severance tax permanent fund. We lost that little bit.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. So the severance tax permanent fund. So there's about $1.5 billion in the severance tax permanent fund that is liquid, meaning it's not tied up in stocks and bonds. And the question is, could we constitutionally take the money out of that, say 10% of the money that's in the severance tax permanent fund, which would be about $500 million, and start to use it for things like the small business loan program? And it turns out that it looks like we can, so long as it's an investment. And so it can't be like the payroll protection plan had, where it's essentially forgiven, it's a grant. It has to be some kind of loan. So we now have somebody that is really an expert on that in the legislature that's been working on it, and that's Representative Matthews. So that's why I say the easy lift was trying to figure out where to get the money from. The harder is to work a program that works within the constitutional limitations of the severance tax permanent fund, and that's Representative Matthews.
Representative Matthews, why don't you pick up that baton that was so skillfully passed to you by Representative Eli?
Well, I don't know about the expert part, but I am definitely working on trying to put together the pieces of how we create a working capital lifeline for our small businesses. There are some 95,000 small businesses in the state, and they provide 49% of the jobs in the state. And at the end of May, we had unemployed something in the range of about 170,000 people. So this is really critical. And these people are unemployed through no fault of their own. These are businesses that have temporarily closed or have cut back substantially. These are locally owned businesses. And one of the key things that we're trying to do is be sure that we're not just doing the large small business, but we're getting down to the mom and pop businesses. A lot of these employ 5 people or less, but there's actually, let me see, I have the figure here. It's kind of an interesting figure. Almost 12,000 people in our state work in businesses with 5 or less employees. So it's really, and then you start going up to 10 and so forth. So we're talking about a lot of jobs. We're talking about a lot of dreams that small business people have when they create these businesses. So the basic idea of the loan program is, and it will, so that it can meet constitutional requirements, is we will provide a loan of up to about $75,000 at 0.5% over prime at the time that the loan is taken out. The idea is that we will get this money out very quickly. Hopefully by September or so, we will have pumped several $100 million into the economy, help these businesses reopen, because what's happened because of the pandemic is that they're in the situation where their rent is continuing to accrue, their utilities are continuing to accrue, but many of them haven't had any income, or they've had very reduced income. And so what we have to do is provide them that lifeline of liquidity, of capital, so that they can bring their bills up to date, they can buy inventory, and because the pandemic continues, a lot of them are going to face a period of time where they have to rebuild their customer base as people become comfortable going out and shopping again. So that's the basic concept of the program. We will be distributing the money. This is the piece that we're working on now, and that's still in a lot of negotiation, but essentially using the financial institutions, the alternative lenders, the certified, the CDFIs, the Certified Development Financial Institutions, pushing this money out statewide, not just on the Rio Grande corridor, but statewide, because these businesses exist statewide, and getting the money out and helping them get in a place where they can reopen, survive, and reemploy or employ people. And we jumpstart the economy in New Mexico.
Great. Well, yeah, the work that you've been doing on this is hard, but it's important. And I hope folks will stay tuned as we get closer to the session. But the idea that we can tap into our severance tax permanent fund to make a state level PPP and Paycheck Protection Program type program it's a wonderful blessing, because in New Mexico we have our land grant permanent fund, our severance tax permanent fund, and that gives us flexibility that many other states don't have. And if there's ever a time to get very creative with how we can put these funds to work, now is the time. And I look forward to seeing another draft of the bill, and hopefully having it heard and debated in the session next week. We'll go now to Senator Daniel Ivey-Soto. He has become the go-to member of the legislature for all things election related. He passed with Linda Trujillo, state representative of Santa Fe, 2 years ago, a large election code cleanup. We saw Senator Ivey-Soto work on legislation to create same-day and automatic voter registration, which is an exciting leap forward for making voting easier and more available to many New Mexicans, especially the same-day voter registration, which is the law now, up to but not including this election day, but every election going forward will include election day. So there's a lot that was done. We have a lot of questions, I should also say, Senator, about what lessons were learned from the June 2nd primary with regard to absentee balloting and voting by mail. I know that's something that you're working on as we get closer to the session. Maybe you can tell folks listening what you're working on and how you see the June 2nd primary and all that went into that with regard to absentee balloting. How does that affect or influence what you want to be working on during the special session?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, let me just appreciate very much the way that you kicked off this town hall with words about the need for racial justice and appropriate policing strategies throughout our entire nation right now. One of the positions that I'm honored to have at this moment is that I'm the president of the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators and representing Latino legislators throughout the entire nation. The Ivey-Soto, the Soto, my last name is Cuban, for those who don't know. And And so not only have I had the opportunity to meet virtually with several of the African American state legislators throughout the country on this issue, but the location where the murder happened that has kicked off this national discussion was 4 blocks away from the home of the state senator that represents that area, Patricia Torres Ray, who serves on the executive committee of the National Hispanic Caucus state legislators. And so she and I have worked together for many years, and we've talked about what is happening at Ground Zero, just outside of her front yard, as this has been transpiring throughout our entire nation. And so it is truly a conversation that is well overdue, and one that we've been needing to have. And so I do want to very much thank you for starting this town hall with that front and center, and recognizing the fact that that's a conversation we need to have in New Mexico as well. I think we do better than most places, but we have issues that we need to clearly need to address on that front. Moving to elections, you know, in the primary election, we learned a few things. Some of them we theoretically knew, and we've now confirmed. Right, one is that for postal transactions is problematic when people are needing to social distance, and many people do not feel comfortable going into a physical polling location. And so finding a way to reduce the number of postal transactions from 4 to 3 or 2 is something that is essential as we look at our general election coming up. But the other thing is to recognize, as we're looking at the general election as we're coming up, is that we need to balance what we think we believe with what we know that we don't know. And what I mean by that is all of the experts are telling us to expect a resurgence of contagion in the fall. But every single one of those experts will also tell you they're not really sure. And so, you know, we need to kind of plan for 2 elections effectively. As we go into the general election, we need to plan to allow in this general election, where I think there's a very high degree of interest. We need to plan for widespread in-person voting if that is possible, and make sure that people have options if that is not possible. And so those are the conversations we're having right now. You know, those are tricky conversations, right? It balances a lot of different issues. And so we haven't quite reached consensus yet on where we're going to be, but I think that's kind of what we're looking at making sure that we can provide some guarantees to. And then the other thing that becomes really essential when we're looking at voting rights in New Mexico, which is different from many other parts of the country, is recognizing that that while the state of New Mexico is a sovereign, and we also have 22 Indian nations, tribes, and pueblos that exist within the state of New Mexico, and they are also sovereign. And that when it comes to issues of contagion, one of the necessities for many of these, for these Indian nations, tribes, and pueblos was to seal their borders for the protection of their people, and in order to be able to stem the contagion that was happening by doing isolation at a level that the rest of us were never called upon to do. But they still have the right to vote. And so then how do we balance that issue as well? And so that is another issue that has been front and center in terms of anything that will come forward in the special session, is to make sure that we provide those guarantees with regard to, as we're having a conversation about racial justice in this country, is to make sure that we're being consistent in the leadership of our legislature, that we are providing opportunities to vote for everybody, regardless of of their own racial background and whether or not the place that they live is urban, is rural, or in a sovereign land within the sovereignty of the state of Mexico.
Well, it's a critically important goal, and I'm so glad that you're continuing to work on it. We tried. You mentioned the other day. You made a very strong effort to have the Supreme Court address a lot of the issues that could have prevented some of the problems. The court didn't see it quite that way, but looking back, your briefing in that case was a very good prediction of the future, and so hopefully we can get the executive and get some legislators to follow your lead on this, because you're right, especially in areas of the Navajo Nation. They've been, really hit hard with COVID, and some of the worst hotspots in the whole world are in the Navajo Nation in terms of percentage of the population that's been infected and affected by the disease. And the problems that we have in rural New Mexico are exacerbated when people who live there are disenfranchised, or it's made very difficult for them to vote. Like places like Chaparral and Southern Otero County is a place that we've had issues for many, many years. So increased mail voting while also making sure early in person is in place is critical. And so hopefully we'll get this done next week. I'll mention one issue that I'm trying to get included on the agenda and get addressed, and that's the issue of qualified immunity. And it is a legal doctrine. The history is, I'll try to make this very quick and then I'll go to questions. Back in 1871, Congress passed a law to combat the Ku Klux Klan in the South. And they said that in this law, which is now referred to as Section 1983, it's Section 1983 of Title 42 of the U.S. Code, that any person who suffers a deprivation of the rights, privileges, or immunities guaranteed to them by the United States Constitution can sue the person who is depriving them of those constitutional rights. They did this in 1871 because the Klan in the South was acting under color of state authority to murder or to injure or to take property from African Americans. And so the people that were doing this can now be sued individually, and a money judgment against them would have to be paid by the person depriving another of their rights under the Constitution. Unfortunately, in 1967, the Supreme Court started a line of cases called qualified immunity, and that has grown over the last 53 years into a very effective shield against primarily law enforcement from being sued when their actions deprive a citizen of their rights under the U.S. Constitution, or resident as well. So, for example, if a law enforcement officer, in the case of George Floyd, that murder, there could also be a 1983 claim against the officer for depriving Mr. Floyd of his right to life without due process of law. In other words, the right you have to continue to enjoy being alive was taken from him without any due process. So there would be a civil rights claim. But that civil claim, as hard as it is to believe, would likely fail under current law, because under the doctrine of qualified immunity, unless there is a case with exactly the same facts as the facts of the George Floyd case, the officer would have qualified immunity because we wouldn't have a previously decided written opinion of a Court of Appeals court that says that it deprives a person of their constitutional rights to have your knee on their neck for 8 minutes and 47 seconds. So it is, we've had cases in New Mexico where children have suffered horrific sexual abuse at the hands of foster parents who are state actors. They were sued under Section 1983. The case went to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, which upheld the New Mexico District Court decision that the foster parents who committed some of the most awful acts of sexual violence against the child, that case was tossed out because there was no prior reported decision of the 10th Circuit informing foster parents that it violated the constitutional rights of the child to abuse them sexually over a period of years. It is literally, to me, unbelievable that this is the law, but it is. New Mexico can change it. We can, two things. We can put into our state statute the law allowing people deprived of their rights under the New Mexico Constitution to file a claim against a public officer that deprives them of those rights, but also we can prohibit any state official in New Mexico from claiming qualified immunity, whether they are in state or federal court. This is going to be, if adopted, I think a very powerful tool that we have to enforce and regulate all of the laws that we have on the books and bring some consequences to the bad apples in law enforcement who really can run roughshod over the rights of everyday people in New Mexico and hold them accountable. And that will be an important tool in the toolbox. New Mexico could be the first state in the country to do this. And it would be hand in glove with the policies that we have on the books in New Mexico that end bias-based policing and all the other reforms. Like, for example, in Albuquerque, 6 of the 8 that can't wait reforms have been adopted. But the enforcement mechanism isn't there because the officers cannot be held individually liable in court if they fail to follow those policies. So this could be an important step in the right direction, and I'm hoping we can get it done in this special session. We've got to come up with some good messaging, because the 3-minute explanation of what qualified immunity is in order to explain the bill is kind of a typical hurdle. But I think it'll make a big difference if we can get it done. And so we're going to be hopefully working on that in the upcoming session. Let me go down to the questions. Let's see. Is there anything, as we go to questions, Senator, Representatives, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go to questions from our Facebook viewers? Okay. So we have a question from Bill Jordan. He suggests that legislative analysis begin to include a section on racial or gender impact, so lawmakers know how justice, healthcare, tax, and education bills impact people of color. How likely is that in a special session or other sessions going forward? I'm wondering if any of my colleagues have a thought on it.
I do, Mr. Speaker. I actually think that's something that Representative Martinez has talked about. It is an excellent idea because it starts to give us a better perspective of the impact of our policies. Again, I'm with the speaker mentioned, it's kind of up to the governor as to whether to put something like that on the agenda, but it certainly would change the culture of the legislature because we would start looking at the impact of what we're doing in a much broader way. So I think for January 2021, it might have a real shot. It's a good idea.
Okay. All right, Bill, you've got 1 vote. Well, 2, 3, 4 votes.
Yes, he does. In the House.
Right. So, that's 4 down, 58 to go. Okay. But I do think it's a good idea. Absolutely. There's a question: what can the state do to ensure equity among the people in New Mexico? I talked a little bit about qualified immunity. I'm curious if others would have a thought on that.
Mr. Speaker, it's an important topic that we need to address. It's also one that we need to have in context, because if we were to, for example, be serious about land reform in New Mexico, there are a number of land grants that over the years have had their lands taken from them, and people have been deprived what was granted through those land grants. But if we're going to be truly honest, then frankly, none of this land that we're all on right now is in many ways being properly used, because we still have the many of the original residents of the territory of New Mexico, the area that is now today New Mexico, whose lands were also infringed upon. New Mexico, I think, exists really well as a multicultural society. It exists really well as a society where in many ways, like I said before, where I think we do better than most other places. But I think policing is a major issue. I think the distribution of assets is a major issue. I think one of the matters that has come up on occasion in terms of what Representative Matthews was talking about in terms of small businesses, the percentage of people of lower educational background and of ethnic and racial minority and women who own their own businesses is actually astoundingly high. And these tend to be small businesses. These are exactly the demographic that Representative Matthews was talking about. And so pursuing policies such as that actually goes a long way towards empowerment and a long way towards allowing people to chart their own course, as opposed to having everybody wait for some national corporation to come in and bless the state.
Mr. Speaker, if I could
Yes, please
chime in. Appreciate the comments that Senator Ivey-Soto made, because I do think that a great deal of equity starts with economic equality in terms of opportunity, particularly, and resources being available. But in addition, I am struck often by the divide that seems to exist between rural New Mexico and urban New Mexico. When I first came to the state, I lived in Alamogordo. Of course, now I live in Albuquerque, but it seems to me that we really need to think hard about how we can do a better job of helping rural New Mexico share in economic benefits and economic growth. I was at a meeting the other day where I understand that in the prior decade, so many of the economic development councils, the housing authorities, all kinds of basic, what I'm going to call financial and social infrastructure. And I know this from serving on the health committee, we saw the same thing with rural health care and regional health facilities. So many of those things were essentially gutted in the last decade, and probably account for some of the tension that now exists between urban and rural New Mexico. And I think that we need to, as we proceed to do things in the state, is to figure out how we can be sure that our less urban neighbors and citizens are part of it. And just watching what's happened on the Navajo reservation and some of the pueblos with the pandemic just cries out for really looking at our entire state. And if all parts aren't thriving, then it reduces the wealth and the goodness and the welfare of our people throughout the state.
Very true. Very true. Let's see, we have a few questions about the logistics of the session next week. We have some questions about the status of the building and online capacity. I'll just say quickly, we yesterday decided to increase dramatically the online presence of the legislature during the session next week. We are mindful that we still have in effect a public emergency health order that encourages people not to gather in groups of 5 persons or more, 5 unrelated persons or more. We consulted with the Departments of Health, Human Services, and with the governor's office on how to have a legislative session in the middle of a pandemic and do so in a way that's safe for the public. And so we made the decision to have the sessions committee meetings, at least from the House, be conducted virtually by Zoom. So anyone with a smartphone or laptop will be able to not just watch, but will be able to offer comment and address the committee as if they were there in the room. And we are going to have a few members in the House who are going to be participating remotely, but we'll have all of those sessions also broadcast on the legislative website, and then the members will be able to participate by Zoom. We made the decision not to, really out of wanting to have an abundance of caution for the health of the public. We could not devise a way that was safe for members of the public to come in and spend several hours in tightly confined committee rooms. This is not like going to Home Depot or to the grocery store where you have high ceilings and widely spaced aisles, and you really can maintain physical distance from others when you're at the hardware store or at the grocery store. Our committee rooms, unfortunately, cannot be reconfigured. Everything is bolted to the floor and bolted to the walls, so we are stuck with the configurations that we've got. And we're trying to strike a balance between the health and safety of the public that might wish to come and observe the session and the ability for them to meaningfully participate. So we're expanding email addresses for those who wish to submit written comments. And then we'll also have the ability of anyone from the public who wishes to be able to speak to the committee chairs and to the committee membership live and in real time by participating in those Zoom or WebEx meetings, as the case may be between the 2 chambers. This is something where we're all going to have to be patient and try to find as much kindness in our hearts for one another, because this is one of the things that's never been done before, but we've never had a public health emergency at the same time as a special session. And we are doing what we think is the best in light of the health crisis. And we're also making sure that we have expanded bandwidth for the legislatures. We anticipate there'll be more than usual that watch the webcam and watch the broadcast these meetings. So we want to make sure that folks that wish to watch and participate will be able to do so. Let's see. David Campbell asks, how are we going to be able to do the severance tax permanent fund program you discussed earlier without violating the state's anti-donation clause? And we just so happen to have the state's leading expert in the anti-donation clause on this Facebook town hall. So, Representative Matthews, would you tell us a little bit about how this is not going to run afoul of the Constitution?
Well, it will not violate the Constitution because the state is getting something in return. And the key part of the anti-donation clause is to avoid a donation, which is why this is not a grant program, it is a loan program. And so in return for the loan of the money, the state will receive interest payments and also some less directly financial benefits, but real benefits in that as business resumes, gross receipts taxes are going to increase because right now those are down, and we're going to have people working and they're going to be paying taxes. So there's a lot of different benefits that are going to accrue as a result of this, but the very basic piece is in return for the loan, there will be interest paid.
Very good. And I want folks watching at home to know that we are looking at this session with help for the budget, that we want to address the issues of equity that we were discussing earlier in the conversation, but also support for the small businesses in New Mexico is so important. You know, business is the driver of our whole way of life in New Mexico. If we don't have a thriving private sector, there's nothing flowing to the state to pay for the public schools and to pay for healthcare and to pay for public safety. And so we're well aware of the need to support small business, because many of the small businesses in New Mexico might be one or two owners and one or two employees. You know, when we talk about small business in New Mexico, we're talking about the folks down the street that have the barbershop on the corner and the difficult 2.5 months that they've just come through when they couldn't open, and what they're having to do now with the COVID safe practices that are in place now. So we are putting help for New Mexico small business at the absolute top of the agenda. We're also looking at a bill that will allow the Department of Taxation and Revenue to waive penalties and interest for gross receipts taxes and property taxes that had to be unpaid or delayed during the health pandemic. That power does not exist in state government right now. It does at the federal level, but not here. And so we think it's appropriate for folks that wanted to delay making these payments to be able not to have to suffer penalties and interest on those taxes. Just get the taxes taken care of when they're able and not have to worry about penalties and interest. That's something that I think is really important that we'll be looking at in the upcoming session. I think we've got time for one more question. And that is there a universal plan for students to return to learning for fall 2020 and beyond? That is a very, very, very good question. And one where we don't have the answer yet. The governor has brought together a panel of education experts from the legislature and from the broader education community and from the broader business community to look at what we can do safely this fall. I think we're going to see a large range of options. We have a report in this week to the legislature that the average student in New Mexico lost about a year's worth of education this spring through distance learning. And when New Mexico, we know in New Mexico, students enter the education pipeline on an average of 2.5 years behind their counterparts in other states. And so this pandemic's impact in terms of making kids fall farther behind on peers in other states is really devastating. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. Right now, the education department is putting in place plans to make distance learning options available in every school district in the state, should that be necessary in the fall. That is a massive undertaking. And we have a lot of questions about broadband because we are still working on rolling broadband out throughout New Mexico. We are this year getting to a point where every school building in the state should have high quality broadband everywhere in New Mexico, from San Juan County to the Boot Heel over to Jal and up to Raton. The whole state should have every building with high quality broadband this year. And it's up to the service providers. These are those private companies that provide the service to your house to get that last mile or that last distance from those school buildings to your house. There's been some innovative work done by Sacred Wind Communication on the western side of the state, in the Navajo Nation and surrounding areas to roll out wireless broadband. So there are a lot of irons in the fire on broadband, but we've got to get that done if we're going to have meaningful opportunities for kids to participate in remote learning, combined with the laptops that they need. There's a lot to do to get that done and get that taken care of. But it's definitely on the radar, and we're certainly going to tackle that when we get into the special session. So we are right at the end, and I always like to give our guests one opportunity to have a few final thoughts before we say goodbye for a little bit. So I'll start. We'll go in reverse order. Senator Ivey-Soto, would you like to offer a few words or a few thoughts to those watching before we say goodbye?
You know, I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the level of engagement around the state and from people on the issues that we should be addressing in this special session. People need to remember it is a special session right now. We'll be coming back in 2021, at least hopefully we'll be coming back in 2021 for a full legislative session to address those issues. But the crowdsourcing of ideas on how to improve New Mexico has just been really impressive. And I think that is being furthered along by town halls like this, where people are able to focus some of those crowdsourced ideas and get some ideas of also how to bring those forth to policymakers. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for hosting the entire series that you've been doing, and helping people to be able to stay engaged as we move forward right now.
Thank you, Senator. President Matthews, any final thoughts?
A couple final thoughts. One is that I forgot to mention that the loan program is also going to be available to nonprofit corporations within the state. So I wanted to add that in. But the other thing I'd like to say is I have been so impressed by how many New Mexicans have been responsible through this pandemic in terms of how they've conducted themselves, how they've wore the mask, how when you shop, people were so kind to each other and try to avoid each other. And it's just been heartening at the level of responsibility and care for one another they have shown. And I really want to say thank you to the population of the state for doing that.
Thank you. Representative Ivey.
Mr. Speaker, and to your audience, we are not going to let the virus be the enemy of democracy. In this session, we are going to be facing two huge issues that we've never faced before. Well, one, the pandemic. The other, of course, is longstanding, is basic justice in America. We are going to make sure, I am the Speaker's rule chair with the Speaker's leadership in the House, and I'm convinced in the Senate, that the public is going to have access to what's going on. The media will have access to what's happening. The process will be transparent. We are working very hard with the other side to make sure that everyone has a fair opportunity, both inside the building to debate, outside the building to ask questions and to see what's happening and be transparent. And so I think you can be confident in your legislature to set the ground rules to do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for having us.
Thank you. And again, thanks to everyone for watching. We will resume these town halls from home after the legislative session next week. A week from today, we're going to be having meetings of the Appropriations Committee and the Rules Committee at the Capitol, and the Senate Rules Committee and Senate Finance Committee also will be meeting. So I'll be otherwise occupied at this time next Wednesday. So please tune in 2 weeks from today when we'll be back and give an update on what happened during the legislative session, what we were able to get done, what was still left on the table for January. I'll look forward to that. Hopefully we'll have some good results to report back. In the meantime, again, stay safe, stay healthy, keep up the fight for justice in America now more than ever. And please follow our work. nmlegis.gov is the legislature's website. We're going to have all sorts of new links on the page to make it very easy to follow what's going on and to keep up with what's happening. And as we use Zoom, we hope that it will look like this and not like the Saturday Night Live sketch. And hopefully none of the members take their devices into the restroom during the floor debate. Hopefully we can avoid that. Please stay healthy, take good care. God bless you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.